The preseason is officially here, and we have everything you need to be looking for in the Rams' first preseason game of the year against the Chargers tomorrow at SoFi Stadium. Which Rams need to have a big preseason just to make the team, and which Rams will actually be playing in the game tomorrow. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your four-time champion Los Angeles Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a favor and subscribe to the fastest-growing Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and if you really want to support the channel, hit that like button. Let us know, which Rams preseason storyline are you most looking forward to? Who do you think will win these position battles? Let us know. My name is Doug McKay. My friends call me D-Mac. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, the Lakers for SI, the Dodgers for Dodgers Nation. Now I'm covering the Rams for Locked On, and today I'm riding solo. Mr. Travis Rogers, the People's Champ, he's out today, but we've got a jam-packed show for you. Later, which Rams players will participate in the preseason opener tomorrow against the Chargers? Who's actually going to play? And in our second segment, which Rams players need to have a big preseason just to make the team? Which Rams players are on the bubble? But we begin today with the storylines that you need to be looking for in the Rams' first preseason game of the year. But first, just a reminder, this episode of Locked On Rams is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. But we begin today with preseason. I'm amped up. I'm fired up. I feel like UFC's Bruce Buffer. It is time because we really get things kicked off. Training camp is over. The boys are back from Irvine, and now we get to see who's going to make this 53-man roster, who's going to win these position battles. And we're going to get the answers to a lot of our questions in the coming weeks. And one of the big tests is tomorrow, the preseason opener. I think the first thing that you need to be looking for is how will the players that are fighting to make this roster perform? These guys that could get cut, these guys that are on the bubble, how will they perform in the first game? Guys that haven't been discussed very much during the training camp because they haven't impressed very much, right? Guys like wide receiver Lance McCutcheon, wide receiver Tyler Johnson, who has made his way onto Rams social media. He has made some highlight catches, so he's someone that's fighting to make this roster. And then you got outside linebacker Kyer Thomas, left tackle A.J.R. Curry, quarterback Brett Rippon, cornerback Sean Jolly, safety Jason Taylor II, running back Ronnie Rivers, and defensive tackle, the last pick of the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. Will he be relevant in Desjuan Johnson? So we're going to dive into this topic more in our second segment, what these guys need to do specifically, but that's one thing you need to look for. How will the guys on the fringes perform? Because if they have a bad game, if they have a good game, their stock could go up or down very quickly based on their performance tomorrow. And then the second storyline you need to be looking at is the offensive line position battles. We talked about it in depth yesterday. Our everyday listeners will know that we talked about the left tackle position battle. Joe Noteboom versus Alaric Jackson. You guys know all offseason I was pounding my fist saying I want to see Alaric Jackson take that spot as the starting left tackle. I think it makes perfect sense this year. He was one of the bright spots for a Rams offensive line that was decimated by injuries, but it feels like right now the starting job of the left tackle spot is Alaric Jackson's to lose. I don't think he's in the red zone quite yet, but he's definitely across midfield somewhere between the 30 and the 40, and I think that all signs are pointing to him being the starting left tackle for the Rams. Now, what does this mean for Joe Noteboom? Well, another thing to look for is does he get reps at right guard? Because we heard that he's been getting reps at that position. Alaric Jackson, he's been with the ones. I think that you're going to see him at right guard tomorrow. I mean, Logan Bruss maybe he finds a home at right guard, but maybe he gets more reps at right tackle as Havenstein's backup. So I think for Joe Noteboom, it's an opportunity for him to say, okay, I can provide some depth, provide some versatility. He started his career at right guard. We know that when he got his opportunity to fill in for Andrew Whitworth at left tackle, he played well, but he hasn't looked like that guy since. He's also prone to injury. So, look, I think this is a big year for Alaric Jackson as well, because if he is the guy, if he's the long-term solution at left tackle, that's going to say a lot about what the Rams do in the upcoming draft. Depending on where their pick is, do you go out there and draft a left tackle for the future if you don't think he's the guy? Because there's going to be some very talented left tackles available in next year's NFL draft. You got Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. You have Joe Alt out of Notre Dame. So I think it's very important to evaluate Alaric Jackson this season, assess his talent, assess if he can be the guy moving forward, because if not, you might want to go in that direction. But I love the fact that this Rams team, Mike LaFleur and Sean McVay, they've already stated that they're going to go with the best five. They're going to go with their most talented, the best offensive line that they think can keep Matthew Stafford vertical. They can reestablish that run game. You're seeing a bigger, girthier offensive line. So I love the direction they're heading in, and I think that you're going to see Alaric Jackson as the starter. I also want to note, too, that, look, I mean, if it doesn't work out for Joe Noteboom, I think he can provide nice experience. He can provide some depth. You can play the guard position like we talked about a few seconds ago. But if you want to move off of him, you could cut him after the season, create $5 million of cap space, eat that $15 million in dead money, or you can hold on to him and use him as that backup swing tackles. So to me, it's a win-win, because if Joe to me, it's a win-win, because if Joe Noteboom wins that job as a starting right guard over Ankrum, it tells you that he earned that position, that he earned that role because he outperformed him during the preseason. He has that experience. That's where he started his career, and you are paying him that salary where he's compensated as an above-average left tackle. But even if that's not the case and he doesn't win that job, he can still provide some quality depth. And after what we saw last season, you can never have enough of that. Then also look at the competition at the center spot. Brian Allen versus Coleman Shelton. There's a lot of similarities to Joe Noteboom and Alaric Jackson at the left tackle spot. You have the guy that's been there, the guy that was the higher draft pick, the guy that's on the bigger contract versus the undrafted free agent, right? The only difference is Brian Allen has had flashes in his career. He's had years where he's been really, really good. I mean, in 2021, he was fantastic, right? So hopefully he can get back to being that guy. Last year, he had a down year. And on top of that, Coleman Shelton is someone who they're very high on. I mean, the offseason, they signed him to a 2-year, $8.75 million deal. And something to look for is how much he starts this year. How many snaps does he get? Because the 2024 year on his deal, that becomes a void year if Shelton plays 55% of the snaps in 2023. So if he's the starter this season, next year becomes void. And then you look at Brian Allen, they restructured his deal the offseason to save $3.2 million. And Allen essentially took a $3 million pay cut for $3 million in guarantees. So that was really their approach with Brian Allen. They were saying, okay, you take this pay cut, or probably we're going to move on from you. So that's going to be a very interesting position battle, because Coleman Shelton has more versatility. He can play one of the guard spots, whereas Brian Allen, he doesn't have that ability. So, I mean, what's Allen's role going to be if he doesn't win that job? That's going to be very interesting. So you got to pay attention to that. And then the next thing you need to be looking for is, how do the quarterbacks play? How will Stetson Bennett look? How will Brett Rippon look? And I think the first thing is Stetson Bennett, because if he has a really nice game, if he looks solid, if he looks the part, I think you're going to see him lock up that position as the Rams' backup quarterback. And I think that's huge. I think he's going to be the best backup quarterback that they've had in years. Of course, Baker Mayfield was very temporary, right? But I think he's going to give them a chance to win if he ever has to be thrusted into the game if Stafford goes down with an injury. I love what I see from Stetson Bennett. Was at practice a few days ago, and you see the touch on the football. You see his ability to hit those back shoulder fades. You see the ball placement, great spin on it, on the crossing routes. And also, he provides that mobility. He can get some yards on the ground. He can break the pocket a little bit. So I definitely think this is going to be a big game for him as far as establishing himself in that role. And if you're Brett Rippon, you've been in this league, right? It's not your first rodeo. You know what it takes to earn yourself a job on an NFL roster. And if things don't go right with Stetson Bennett, he'll be that guy. But I think this Rams team, they want to take two quarterbacks. Of course, you have Matthew Stafford and then Stetson Bennett, and use that roster spot for another position where you can add some depth. Cornerbacks, running backs, safeties, those are positions where you can add another guy on the roster. And then, are they going to get a pass rush? Okay, the Chargers won't be playing their starters, and we know that that's going to be one of the big keys this year because there's a lot of inexperience at the edge rusher spots. Michael Hoyt, of course, had so much momentum last season. Will he carry that into the preseason? Will he start at the OLB spot, right? I mean, last year, 4.5 sacks in 6 games. Big dude. He moves from the interior line to, he goes the outside linebacker spot. Sometimes he struggles against one-on-one situations with speedy receivers or speedy running backs on jukes because of his size, but this is someone that can be disruptive. He can wreak havoc. And then will rookie Byron Young hit the ground running and be the guy? Will he be the athletic freak that we saw during training camp? He has all the measurables, all the physical tools to have an impact in year one. You don't necessarily see a lot of rookie edge rushers have big years. It usually takes some time, but I think Byron Young, he has the physical tools to give it a run. And you look at that position, they're thin. I mean, you have Daniel Hardy, you have fellow rookie Nick Hampton, not a ton of guys that they'll be competing with for those spots. I still think there's a chance they pick up a veteran edge rusher based on how they perform. So if they don't look the part, I think maybe the Rams possibly go out there and pick someone up if they become available. You look at the defensive end spot, Marquise Copeland, Ernest Brown IV, Kobe Turner at the nose tackle spot. Will they get to the quarterback? Will they apply some pressure against the Chargers backups? That's going to be something you have to look for. And then Puka Nacua. Is Puka Nacua the real deal? I think he absolutely is. Size 14 cleats, wears number 17 like Robert Woods, someone who makes contested catches, can get big first downs, he can hit the block. I mean, he does so many things on that field. And I think between him and Tutu Atwell, I think they're going to mix time. I think you're going to see Cooper Kupp at the WR1, of course, WR2 being Van Jefferson, and then Puka Nacua and Tutu Atwell. I think they're going to split time. So we'll see how he performs tomorrow. I think it's going to be a big game for this Rams team, and I'm very excited because we get to see some real preseason action with real position battles on the line. It's very different than what we've seen in years past. But coming up, which Rams players need to have a big preseason just to make this roster? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. But first, let's talk about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. The football season is about to start. Maybe you're gearing up for the start of your new year, and hiring people is all about finding the right candidates, knowing where to look for the right candidates. That's why LinkedIn Jobs is so important. It's so easy to create job posts for free on LinkedIn Jobs. You just add your purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday and sometimes on the weekends. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, be sure to do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button. Let us know which of these Rams players that are on the bubble will eventually make the 53-man roster. And also a special shout out to our everyday listeners. We appreciate you listening to every episode episode, watching every episode, and you can be an everyday listener too. Join the club. Membership is free, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. But here in our second segment, we're going to take a look at some of these players that are on the fringes that need to have a big preseason just to make the roster, starting with Lance McCutcheon. So you know the story last year. Lance McCutcheon was fantastic. He was impressive. He was essentially the Rams preseason MVP. The chemistry that he built with Bryce Perkins and all the successes that he had. Only problem is that success didn't carry over into the regular season. When he got his opportunity, he struggled to gain separation and make big plays, and you haven't heard too much about him during training camp, and you've also added some depth at the wide receiver position, right? You draft Puka Nacua, who's going to have an impact, who's going to be a meaningful contributor on this team. You also signed some veterans in DeMarcus Robinson, who I think is going to be the WR4 that's going to get some opportunities as well. Tyler Johnson is fighting for a spot. We'll talk about him in a second. You still have Ben Skoranek, right? Tutu Atwell. So I think it's going to be very difficult for him to make this team because, like I said, the top 6 wide receivers, they're set in stone. Kupp, Jefferson, Tutu, Puka, Sko, Robinson. Those are pretty much locked in at this point. So you have one spot available. Then it could come down to McCutcheon, Tyler Johnson, Austin Trammell, or if one of those UDFA step up, the Xavier Smith type. So we'll see if they emerge during training camp and now into the preseason. And then you got Tyler Johnson, the aforementioned Tyler Johnson. He's someone that they brought in as a veteran. He's someone who is great when it comes to contested catches, gives Matthew Stafford another potential red zone threat. He's made some big plays during training camp. He's been featured on Rams Social. I know that seems like it's a nothing burger, but we know that, hey, if you feature on that social, that they think you might be a part of their future. And look, I think he's someone that has experience. He brings that, but I think if they hadn't have signed DeMarcus Robinson, maybe he makes this team. But since DeMarcus Robinson has showed out the way he has, it's going to be a tough putt for him to make this roster. So I don't necessarily see it, but we'll see how he looks, because if he impresses, I think Sean McVay will really appreciate his veteran leadership, what he brings to the table as a receiver. He's had success. I mean, he's played with Mahomes. You saw he played with Tom Brady. Of course, he's the one that created that big pass interference play in the Packers-Bucks NFC Championship game. So, yeah, there's still a chance. I wouldn't rule it out. And then you got Brett Rippon, we talked about a few minutes ago. His chances are pretty slim. Like I said, I think the Rams are going to just keep 2 quarterbacks, but Bennett is not a lock at this point. I mean, I think he's in the red zone. I think that, of course, he's going to make that 53-man roster, but barring an injury, barring something unforeseen, that's going to be his position. I think the Rams go with 2 quarterbacks. And then you got Jason Taylor II. So Jason Taylor II, his chances dwindled a little bit. They were diminished after they made the signing of John Johnson III. That definitely hurt his chances a little bit as far as the role he could have on this team. But I do think they're going to keep some more safeties, because that's what they've done in the past. That's a position where they've had depth. Like I said, you can add that safety spot because you don't have to keep 3 quarterbacks. There's other position groups on this team that you don't have to go as big on. There's not as much depth. So I do think he probably still has a decent chance to make this team, and probably ultimately will. He can play special teams, has a lot of talent. They're very high on him. So I definitely think it's possible. But like I said, the signing of John Johnson III, that definitely put that out of whack a little bit and shook things up. And the next outside linebacker, Kyer Thomas. So the first thing that sticks out to me about Kyer Thomas is the fact that he's 3rd string on the Rams' first depth chart of the season heading into their preseason opener. And who's he behind? 2 rookies, Byron Young and Nick Hampton. So anytime you're behind 2 rookies, that's pretty telling about how they feel about your chances of making this roster. But I will say the outside linebacker spot is so wide open that if he does impress, that if he does show out, that he has a chance to force his way onto this team and have a role. It's not like it's a shoo-in that he's not going to make the team. He's not a guaranteed cut or anything like that, but he's going to have himself a pretty big preseason. And then there's rookie defensive tackle Deshaun Johnson. Now, you probably already know this by now, but he was the last pick in the NFL draft, and the question is, can Mr. Irrelevant be relevant for the Rams? Can he carve out a role on this team? Now, there wasn't too much noise about him during training camp. Not a lot of coaches talking him up. Aaron Donald had some nice things to say about him, but it didn't seem like he had a great training camp. Still learning on the fly, still trying to learn how to be a pro, but I still think there's a chance that he makes this team. I'm not sleeping on him. I think he's one to watch. I'd keep my eyes on him. I think he's someone that was so productive in college, it almost feels like he's an in-game player, right? Someone that when the lights turn on, that's when he performs. He had 14.5 sacks last year at Toledo. He was very impressive in all the Senior Bowls. They said he was unblockable at the Shrine Bowl. So if you look at his spot on the depth chart right now, he's third string behind Donald and Murchison. He's ahead of Vincent. So I still think he can make this team, and I think he has a chance to have a big preseason. He's a name that I have my eyes on. And then there's running back Ronnie Rivers. I think Ronnie Rivers has to have a very solid preseason to make this team. If you look at his position on the depth chart right now, he's in front of Freeman and Evans, and we know Evans is going to make the team. They're very high on Evans. He has a lot of upside, a lot of potential. They moved up in the 6th round just to pick him. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, he would have been a higher pick, but because of the devaluation of the running backs position, he was still available in the 6th round. I think there's a chance he could have an impact this season. I've said it all along. I think he has the potential to be one of the steals of the draft. So he's going to make this team. And if you look at Royce Freeman, he's had some success as a solid backup. He hasn't reached his potential as a feature back like they hoped he would be when he was the leading rusher coming out of Oregon, but still, he has had some success in this league. I think there's a chance he makes this team. So Ronnie Rivers, he needs to have a really, really solid preseason to make this team, or else he's going to have to hit up the casino and win another $500,000 playing 3-card poker. And then there's left tackle A.J.R. Curry. So he is a swing tackle candidate. We'll see what he can do in the preseason. It does feel like he's been a little lost in the shuffle here along the offensive line, but if he has a big preseason, we know that they're going with the best guys. So he has an opportunity in front of him. He just has to go out there and perform. And then finally, how about Sean Jolly? So Sean Jolly, if you look at the depth chart right now, he's listed as one of the top 6 cornerbacks in the depth chart, but Tamarcus Davis is the name to watch. Tamarcus Davis, a undrafted free agent out of Arizona State. He was a transfer. He goes from Baylor to Arizona State. Different systems. Didn't have as much success there, but he's someone that has a lot of talent, a lot of physical tools to play that position, great instincts, and also the most important thing, he was working with the ones during training camp, during spurts. So that's something that you really have to strongly consider, because I think from a talent perspective-wise, he's someone that could emerge. The light could totally go on for him, and he could make this team. So Sean Jolly is going to have to step up and perform well in the preseason. So look, opportunity knocks. These guys are going to get their shot. We see every preseason, there's guys that impress that you didn't expect. There's also guys that underperform. So you really just have to play this thing out on the field, and we'll witness it in real time. But these guys have the talent. They just have to put it all together to make this roster. But coming up in our final segment, which Rams will play during the preseason? Who will be on the field wearing the horns tomorrow night at SoFi Stadium when the Rams take on the Chargers at 6 o'clock Pacific time? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday and sometimes on the weekends. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, another reminder, if you haven't yet, do us a favor and subscribe to the Locked On Rams YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, hit that like button, and let us know. How do you want to see the Rams utilize their players during preseason? Do you want to see more snaps, more reps from expected starters than in years past? Let us know. But here in our final segment, we're answering the question, who will we see in the preseason for the Rams? Which players will suit up? Which players will get significant snaps for this Rams team? Because look, this is a very different year. And we know that in years past, Sean McVay's model has worked. He has had a lot of success with it. You prioritize health and you enter the season and you just run with it. But this is a very different season because you don't have all those established veterans. You don't have guys that you know are going to win each and every position, right? But there's tons of position battles on the offensive side, on the defensive side, lots of youth and inexperience, tons of rookies. And I think also on top of everything else, you look at the schedule early on. It is brutal, and you need guys to gel during preseason. They really have a chance to get off to a solid start. But first, let's start with the guys that will not be in there. Guys that have no business. I'm talking about the made men. Guys that you 100% will not see during the preseason. Of course, I'm talking about QB1 Matthew Stafford. I'm talking about Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Higbee, and Rob Havenstein. These guys are made men. You have to prioritize their health. They have nothing to prove, really nothing to gain during preseason. These guys are like actors that don't have to audition for a part. They don't have to read for a part. I'm talking about superstars. I'm talking about Leonardo DiCaprio and George Clooney and Bill Murray, those types. So you won't see them, but you look at that next tier and you talk about guys like Van Jefferson, who's essentially a lock to be the Rams' WR2. He's dealt with knee injuries. He's already had 3 rest days during training camp. I think that he most likely doesn't see very much action at all. Then there's Cam Akers, who's going to be the RB1. Of course, last season he had a great finish to the season, a very strong finish, carried that momentum into training camp. He looks bigger, he looks stronger. So those guys you just will not see very much of, if at all. And then there's that next tier. This is the probably nots. You got safety Jordan Fuller, linebacker Ernest Jones, cornerback Kobe Durant, wide receiver Ben Skoranek, wide receiver Tutu Atwell, safety John Johnson III, and cornerback Akello Witherspoon. So for this category, I'll start with Akello Witherspoon because he's someone that I think is going to have a prominent role in this team. I think he's going to be one of the starting outside cornerbacks, prototypical size. He can play that position. He was really good in 2021. Last year he was dealing with the hamstring injury, only played 4 games. But I think that for him to familiarize himself with this Rams defense and really get those reps, because he wants to prove that he can still be that guy that he was back in 2021 when he was one of the better cornerbacks in the league with the San Francisco 49ers. But if you look at this category, it's either guys that A, are going to start, or B, are going to have significant roles on this team. So getting snaps for some of these guys definitely can help. I mean, John Johnson III might want to brush up a little bit on this defense. Hasn't played under this scheme since 2020 when it was Brandon Staley. Now it's Raheem Morris, and Morris runs essentially the same scheme as Staley did, but still might be good to get him in there. Then last year, Tutu Atwell, he didn't get those preseason reps, and I think that stunted his growth a little bit. And Tutu is someone that has absolutely taken some big steps forward. I love what I heard from Matthew Stafford saying that he, quote, has a master of the offense when he was asked about Tutu Atwell, and he's more dynamic. They're diversifying him, right? He's someone that is not just a vertical threat, not just a guy that you need to take the top off of defense. Yes, that is his strongest suit, is his speed, but you're starting to see him diversify, make contested catches over the middle, hit him on crossers, hit him out of the backfield. So I think he'd benefit playing some preseason snaps, playing in some preseason games, and then you look at Kobe Durant, it's going to be his first year as a full-time starter, so he could use the reps. So for the most part, you won't see a ton of acts from those guys, but I do think they would benefit. Then there's the probably will play a decent amount. Now, here you get a lot of the position battles. You get Brian Allen, Coleman, Shelton. They're battling out for the center spot. You got Alaric Jackson, Joe Noteboom. We talked about them a ton. They're going to be battling for that left tackle spot. And then you look at Coleman, Shelton, and the fact that he's got this big opportunity. We talked about his contract status early. We talked about Brian Allen and what he's dealing with. He's the veteran versus the younger player. So those will sort themselves out. And then at the offensive line, you have left guard Steve Avila, the Rams' first pick in the 2023 draft. They select him with the 36th overall pick, the 5th pick in the 2nd round. Rookie out of TCU. He's someone that's going to start at left guard. I think he needs more reps. Like Sean McVay always says, repetition is the mother of learning. The more you play, the more you learn. So we know that he's going to be the guy, but I think that facing some NFL competition early will help him early in the regular season, really kind of get the ball rolling so he can really hit the ground running. And then you got outside linebacker Michael Hoyt. So this is his first season where he's going to be a full-time edge rusher. And I think he's still new, still raw, still green in the position. And we're going to see, is he truly going to be a long-term viable option there? Or is he too big? Does he need to be moved back to the interior line? So I think we still need to see him prove it a little more, and I think that preseason is the place for it. And then you got Demarcus Robinson, wide receiver, veteran. He's someone that's turned heads. He's wowed during training camp. Is he going to carry that over to the preseason? Because he's got tons of NFL experience, but A, he's still learning McVay's system, and B, he has a chance to really impress the coaches and work his way up the depth chart. Because right now, I think he's WR4, but I think you're going to see plays better during the preseason. He has more success. It's going to be more of an opportunity for him early on in the year because he's someone that can really go up and get it. He's a go up and get it guy, right? Contested catches. That's what you love to see from Demarcus Robinson. I think Kyron Williams is someone who needs some reps, needs some time. We know that McVay's high on him. He's going to be someone that's going to be used early on in the season. preseason. You look at the tight end position, Bryson Hopkins, he's played well. He's taken advantage of the fact that Hunter Long's injured, that Davis Allen's injured. I think he still needs to perform to really hold them off entering the year. And then look, those guys are probably going to play a good amount, not a ton, but they're definitely going to get some reps. And then the guys that are guaranteed to play, you're going to see the Darion Kendricks, the Russ Yeast, the Quentin Lakes, the Byron Youngs. Those guys, we're going to have to see how much progress they've made. Do we have to put them back in the oven and let them cook a little more? Well, we're going to kind of find out, right? Find out what they can do for this team this year. And then everyone else, you're going to see out there getting significant action. So it's going to be very exciting. You're going to see the most compelling and intriguing preseason that we ever have. I mean, think of years past, your anticipation for preseason, knowing you're going to see a lot of players that weren't going to have any type of role for this team. That is not the case this year. This does have a little bit of a Christmas Eve type feel when you consider what is at stake, how many position battles there are. I'm looking forward to it, and so should you. And we're going to be back Monday to break it all down. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. And until next time, whose house is Locked On Rams house?